Really means. Let's turn to Shashank Joshi. He's an associate fellow at RUSI, that's the Royal United Services Institute, and he joins us now from CNN's London Bureau. Thank you very much. From what we know of the military operations over the last 24 hours or so, how would you assess how they're going?
Well, this is the predictable, stable phase of the operations in which a coalition of forces are simply paving the way for clearing Libya's skies. That's the no-fly zone, and it will probably go very smoothly. There may be civilian casualties, but Libya's air defences are comfortably manageable. The problem, however, is this UN resolution allows much more than just that. It is an expansive resolution allowing attacks on ground targets. So the question is, how effective and clinical will those be? And how effective will they be in driving Gaddafi's forces out of the eastern cities? That question won't be answered until much later today or tomorrow.
You think even that soon?
Excuse me?
You think that this question might be answered within the next 12 hours or so?
Well, we've certainly already seen initial French attacks on ground forces. Some of those attacks were symbolic. Clearly, the French were interested in leading this operation from the front. But I think the coalition powers will be aware the longer they leave it, the more Colonel Gaddafi's armour and infantry can filter into urban areas where they are harder and harder to hit. The delay between passing this resolution and taking action has already generated massive challenges because Gaddafi has moved so far into cities like Benghazi.
As you know, the UN mandate itself didn't call for regime change. The US has called for that, for example. Can this no-fly zone, however, be separated or made distinct from the question of the future of the Gaddafi regime?
Well, the no-fly zone can be imposed in isolation, but all that will do is afford some measure of bombardment from the sky. You still require attacks on ground forces to really protect civilians. But you're quite right to note we're getting mixed signals. Is the intention merely to establish a buffer zone around Benghazi and therefore contain Colonel Gaddafi, or is it to make sure that containment doesn't last indefinitely via regime change? And if regime change is the objective, it can't be done through the rebels who are not yet militarily viable. So the only option is to take the gamble and put incredible pressure on the regime in Tripoli with the hope that it crumbles. That is, however, at this point, just a gamble.
And why, it may seem an obvious question, is it such a gamble? How depleted or indeed how well resourced is Colonel Gaddafi to face this kind of no-fly zone? How will this deter his ability to move around, for example, Libya?
Well, firstly, he's extremely resilient. He has been restricted in a number of key ways. He can no longer move important forces on open road between cities. He can no longer use his aircraft, and therefore he can't use airlift to ferry troops from one place to the other. But what he can continue to do is maintain his grip on Tripoli. He's circled his compound with human shields. He's retained troops loyal to his command. And so we've seen in Iraq, for example, how Saddam Hussein could hang on for 12 years under a no-fly zone and an oil embargo. Why do we assume Colonel Gaddafi will instead collapse within weeks?
I mean, is it possible, a final question if I may, that we're looking at a kind of protracted situation not unlike perhaps something like, I'm thinking of Cyprus, where it's divided, as you know, between the Turkish part and the Greek Cypriot part?
Well, certainly, many of these conflicts in the past, even humanitarian interventions, have resulted in a frozen stalemate or de facto partition. In Kosovo, in Serbia, Kosovo was carved out. In Iraq, two areas were separated from the main rump of Iraq. Now here, that's unlikely to happen because the rebels themselves will consolidate their strength and push outwards. They want to see a unified Iraq under their control. So partition, a la Cyprus, isn't really a stable equilibrium.
Shashank Joshi in London, thanks very much indeed for that analysis.